So today we're going to learn all about good note-taking skills. And our goal is that by the end of the video, you should be able to take enough notes during a lecture or in-class instruction to help you learn both during the class and later on when the class is over. I know this sounds super boring, but actually, this is kind of a game-changing day because you're going to need this skill for the rest of your academic career. So we're going to do this with the help of different Ivy League colleges, and their advice is woven into this presentation, so you can hear what they advise students do while taking notes. So when adults tell you to take notes or study your notes, that could mean a few different things, and there's no one right way to take notes. We're going to explore several different kinds. Here's what we're afraid of. What adults don't want is for you to over-highlight and over-annotate everything, like in a textbook. And we don't want you to try to do too much, like writing down every single word the teacher says. That tends to backfire. We also don't want you to take notes, but take ones that are a hot mess. These will most likely not actually help you if you can barely read them, let alone understand them. And finally, we don't want you to take too little notes. Okay? Now, in this example, I'm not saying that doodling is automatically a problem or always a problem. But look, in this sample picture, the doodling detracted from the student's actual notes. I'm willing to bet that this student wasn't really listening, probably missed some important information, and look, not a lot made it down to paper. So I'm questioning how much learning happened in this class. Across the whole spectrum, you don't want to take too much or too few notes. So why do it at all? Well, there's a ridiculous amount of research supporting the importance of note-taking and not just reading something that's already pre-written for you. For example, a lot of researchers have found that information contained in notes had a much greater chance of being remembered compared to things that maybe were heard but not written down. So you don't just want to listen in life. The note-taking is an important part. Why? Because when you take those notes, you are listening and processing the information and writing it down and then probably rereading it. That repeated information is what helps stuff stick in your short-term and hopefully long-term memory a whole lot better. But why take them yourself? For example, I know a lot of students who just decide, oh, I'll borrow my friend's notes later, or I'll get these later somehow. Well, both new and older studies suggest that we learn and remember it better when we are the ones who write it by hand, instead of just typing it or just reading someone else's notes. Because again, that mental process of choosing what to write down, that initial selectivity, leads to long-term comprehension and learning. Here's the ladder of what's least good for your brain and then best for your brain. Just reading it is fine. It's even better to copy down information you're reading. Even better to write down word for word something you're hearing, but best to, again, listen, process, and pick and choose what's worth writing down. Now, you might already be questioning me a little bit right now, because I just hinted a moment ago that handwriting is better than typing. Well, sorry, but some studies at least suggest that handwriting is better for most people. Now, it's true that typing might be faster for some, but not everyone's great at typing, so maybe handwriting is better for you. Another benefit of handwriting is that it's easier to kind of self-annotate your notes, draw those lines and arrows and connections. and again, possibly better for the brain. Of course, electronic notes are nice if you need to share those notes faster with yourself or someone else. So it's going to kind of depend on the situation. It's okay to handwrite or type on a case-by-case basis, depending on the class or depending on the unit you're doing. Now, we've gone over why we should take notes. Here's the good part. Here's how. What's the right way? Well, I already told you there is no one right way, but I'll tell you what's the wrong way. Do not obsessively try to write down every single word that your instructor says. It is ideal to find that happy medium between too much and not enough. And I know some of you are going to have a really hard time with this. You're going to have a really hard time letting go and not writing down every single word. And maybe you think it's better to just record everything just in case. But neuroscience does not support this at all. And if you have to write down everything, at least abbreviate or paraphrase, put it in your own words, what's being said. Don't obsess over getting every single word verbatim. You may think your teachers are just spewing randomness, but a majority of the time when you're sitting in class or you're sitting in even a formal lecture, what you're getting is not random. So what should you listen for? Well, listen both for me, and I self-adjust from speaker to speaker, okay? Because every teacher is a little bit different. But I like this piece of advice from Berkeley. Check with other students and compare your notes with theirs to see if maybe they got something that you missed. And I also like this other piece of advice from Berkeley. If the lecturer says that he or she will make 4 or 5 points, or list 4 or 5 something or others, then make sure your notes have 4 or 5 something or others. Again, look at and listen to those clues of what they're going to discuss and make sure what you've written down matches. So here's an acronym that I've made for you to help you remember what's worth writing down. First, I suggest you write down definitions, especially if the teacher has a special definition that's like a little different from the textbook or a little different from other sources. You want to have their wording down on your paper. I also suggest you write down unique stuff, information that other textbooks won't have or your other class resources won't have. Some teachers will lecture on information that's also in the textbook, but some teachers, especially in college, will purposely not want to waste your time in that way, and they will say stuff that's unique or in addition to other sources. Which brings us to the N, new stuff. Write down anything you didn't already know before, or that's brand new, or you're not sure if you're going to need it. It's okay to err on the side of writing down things that are new. I suggest you write down causes and effects. For example, if you're in a history class, you can write down the causes leading up to a war and what its short and long-term legacies were. And finally, examples. Examples are key in a lot of classes, especially if you know you're going to have a test on this, or you know you're going to have to do any kind of writing where you have to invent your own example. Even within that framework of what to write down, there are several different options for how you're going to write that all down or how you're going to organize all that information in some way that makes sense. Here are the ones we're going to talk about the most today. We've already kind of talked about the anything goes method, where you write down whatever you want, wherever you want, and however, and we know that that can backfire. Some people believe strongly in only writing down main ideas. Only writing down the very short bullets of thought that are most important. That's good if you are someone who learns by listening because you're getting the most important ideas down without a lot of detail. But that can backfire if you're going to be graded on having detail or knowing details. A lot of us teachers like an outline or bullet form, like bullet points or some sort of alphanumeric system where you're writing down both main ideas and supporting details or examples. Okay, this is what a lot of people kind of go to naturally, and this is what most people mean when they say, take notes. What's growing as a trend is color coding. Whether that means you are highlighting your notes with different colors or even using different ink color pens. We'll talk about that more later. Cornell Notes are a very specific style. It's a type of graphic organizer that a lot of colleges are really falling in love with for their students. And finally, there are a lot of different kinds of graphic organizers and more visual web methods in addition to Cornell Notes that we can talk about. So for number 6, hopefully you have checked which of these you have tried before and try to think about whether or not these worked for you. Is your current note-taking style effective, or is it maybe something that could use some improvement? First, we're going to talk more about outlines and bullets. Again, this is the type that most people are familiar with. It can be bullet points, it can be an alphanumeric style, or that combination of letters and numbers like these Roman numerals and different ABCs. Or maybe it's going to be something much more visual that doesn't really conform to any kind of pre-established norm, like this one. A lot of people like to have that hierarchy of big idea versus supporting idea, and that's why we like an outline style. Color coding, however, is something you can do either by itself or in addition to the outline style. Again, one version is to take the notes that you made and go back with a highlighter and color code some of the different things. Like maybe you're going to decide that main ideas are orange and dates are like yellow or green and vocab is pink or whatever. You make your own little key here to the side to remember what color means what. That's a type of annotation or coding that helps the super important stuff stick out and helps you know what you're looking at a glance. Take that a step further and look over here on the left. You could get really fancy and switch pens a lot while you're listening so that you are writing things down in different colors the first time. If that's too much for you, you could technically do this on the right, go home and rewrite them in different colors, but that depends on how much time you have. So no matter how you experiment with it, there are some teachers who are really getting into color coding as a memory device. What's growing in popularity at the college level is something called Cornell Notes. As the title suggests, this graphic organizer or this style was developed by a professor at Cornell University, and it looks something like this. In a majority of the space, in the notes column, you're going to take notes just like you might have otherwise, maybe in a bullet or an outline form. This isn't really any different. But over in the left-hand margin, it's your recall column. You can take notes to self here. You can do stars and question marks and symbols. You can rewrite and paraphrase main ideas. Or do anything else that you need to make sure you're synthesizing and understanding everything that you had scribbled frantically in that notes column. And then at the bottom, either on the bottom of every page or just at the very, very end, you write a quick summary to review what was most important, what you learned, or what those main points were. And here's an example over here. Okay, this is someone who has taken traditional notes in the main area and has written questions or notes to self to the left to make sure that he or she really understood it. some people are really strong with webs or processes or more visual notes. And if that's you, there's nothing wrong with that, especially in maybe a science class or in certain kinds of math where you either want to have diagrams or it helps to see, again, that ordered process like a water cycle or whatever this is supposed to be. Okay? There are all kinds of times in science, history, and English class when a web might work as well, when you need to show how different ideas connect with each other or build off of each other. But these webs might not work for everything. You can't count on being able to do this all the time in every class for every lecture or lesson. But it's a good thing to have handy when the occasion calls for it. And you know what? The reality is, your notes in the future are probably going to be a mix of all these things. I like how in this picture, you see some moments that look like an outline. You see different kinds of color coding. You see everything from a table to an inverse web and different kinds of relationship diagrams. Okay? You don't have to rigidly stick to just one method, when in reality, that mix might be what's best for you in that class. So let's pretend now you have those notes. What are you supposed to do with them? Well, the first thing is that you need to study them ASAP, as soon as possible. I like this bolded fact here from Stanford. Students forget 50% of what they learn if they don't review within 24 hours. Wow. That's a lot of information that gets lost really fast. What that tells us is that even if you think you understand everything in that moment, it doesn't mean you're going to remember it. So you have to both take notes and reread them that night. Because there's some evidence that that's what your memory truly needs. Okay, colleges also suggest you keep your notes organized, like dating and numbering the pages to keep them in order, and keeping all your notes for one class in one place, like your one folder or binder for that class. And finally, use all of your resources. Don't just study the notes or just reread the textbook before you take a test. Look at everything in combination. If a teacher gave it to you, you should probably review it. Alright, so in your guided notes, number 7 is false, because it does matter when you study them. Alright, number 8 is also false, because you need to keep your notes safe. Now, everything I've talked about so far is about a standard traditional lecture. But education isn't always just a lecture. So here's what to do in certain special scenarios. For example, if a teacher says, "Oh, the PowerPoint is online," don't worry about writing everything down. Well, you probably should take notes anyway. Maybe you'll write on loose leaf, or maybe you'll print out those slides and take notes in the margins or something. Especially if the teacher hands you a copy of those PowerPoint slides. Again, annotate that packet and add comments or symbols, or annotations, or color coding even. If the teacher gives you guided notes, you might say, "Oh, sweet, all I have to do is fill in the blanks or maybe occasionally write stuff down." No. You should do whatever the guided notes tell you, but also maybe annotate them or color code them. If the teacher only gives you a worksheet or a rubric or some sort of assignment handout, you don't get to just sit there. I would annotate that. I'm often telling people to write a note or a comment off to the side, or to remember something for later. So write things down, even if you're not sure if you need it. Now, not every school allows you to do this, but if you're in a case where the teacher lets you take a picture of those notes with your phone, That's nice. You should probably still write some things down. So the bottom line is, regardless of what your teacher does or does not give you, you should probably still be moving your pencil. Don't assume that you're going to be fine or remember this later. Alright? So number 9. If a teacher gives you guided notes or PowerPoint slides and you don't need to write anything down, baloney. False. Number 10. Notes are overrated since you're totally going to remember this later? Also baloney. Also false. Here are 3 more special situations. If you're doing online learning or flipped classroom or any kind of learning from a video, same rules apply. Still gotta write down a combination of main ideas and details in your favorite style. The only reason a video is different is that you get to push pause or rewind, which is cool. If you're taking notes from a reading, like a textbook chapter that's nonfiction, whether you own the book or not, resist the temptation to only highlight or only recopy stuff word for word or verbatim. Make sure you're making those comments and those connections as well. If you're taking notes from fiction or poetry or something that's not nonfiction, you can still take notes on that. They might be different. Maybe you're going to be summarizing what happened or make observations about literary devices and stuff, but you could still take notes on that. So again, if the teacher's talking, your pencil should probably be moving. You might wish later that you'd written down some stuff. So number 11, if you're taking notes from a video lecture, the same rules apply? Yep, true. Number 12, true or false? If you're taking notes from a reading, highlight as much as you want? False. I mean, you don't want to over-highlight. That could be bad. And 13, if a teacher's talking, your pencil should probably be moving? Yup. Now, if you are interested in reading more about everything I've said today, here are 3 of my favorite articles. They have good information for anybody. Now take a minute in your guided notes and look at the 2 review questions at the end. Fill them in now, being specific and honest. What's the biggest thing you learned today? How does your current style of note-taking need to change? And even if it's already good, could it be better? Thanks for listening.